the next battleground is the mind.
I feel like the battleground's always been the mind.
Even when the battleground is the battleground is the mind. Like morale, disillusion, strategy. The battlefield has gone from being a distinct area to just the surface of the earth.
Be skeptical of word salad. All that nonsense. Make fun of them. Call them out. You'll see that there's no wizard behind the curtain.
Shakespeare said it best, methinks the lady doth protesteth too much. The more that you try to justify to yourself that something is correct, the more likely that it's not.
The originator of Occupy Wall Street later said he shouldn't have occupied Wall Street, he should have occupied the Fed.
If all of technological progress is like this blade that's cutting through time and then has this wake, vast majority of us are out in the wake, but there are individuals who are like right at that tip.
The cutting edge. This just reminded me of Bitcoin because it's so elegant in its simplicity. There's all of these Keynesian economists delivering these complicated models about why it will never work. And then in the real world, it's just practically working in ways that no one's theorizing could have predicted. Okay, so we're jumping back into Taleb's Antifragile. This time starting with, my very fragile copy of Antifragile. Starting in chapter 13, which he titled Lecturing Birds on How to Fly. And he opens this with like kind of a funny story that serves the point in the rest of the chapter. And that he's talking about in 2012, he was rolling his suitcase full of books through the airport. And he was reflecting back on the time, which I guess is roughly 20 years ago, probably in the 90s, when luggage, a lot of people didn't use wheeled luggage. They didn't use the luggage that's on the tiny wheels that we're all accustomed to now. And so the point that he's going to get to in this chapter is what he calls the translational gap, which is the time that something is invented separate from the time at which it is fully implemented or put to its fullest and best use. Obviously, the wheel is something we invented a very, very long time ago. I don't even know the timeline on that. I don't know if anyone knows the timeline on that.
I mean, he says 6,000 years.
6,000 years, right? So it's as old as gold, basically. But it took us until the 80s, 90s, something like that, to start putting the tiny wheels on the luggage. So there's this translational gap between invention and implementation. And I guess with that, I could read a bit of an excerpt here. This is on page 189. He says, it took me a lifetime to figure out the second point. Implementation does not necessarily proceed from invention. A little further down, he writes, just taking something to market requires struggling against a collection of naysayers, administrators, empty suits, formalists, mountains of details that invite you to drown, and one's own discouraged mood on occasion. In other words, to identify the option, again, there is this option blindness. This is where all you need is the wisdom to realize what you have on your hands. So there is this kind of technological inertia where like people just assume that the way things have always been done is the way they will continue to always be done. And there's a lot of momentum in that direction. And if you're going to be an innovator, even in something basic like putting wheels on heavy suitcases or luggage, you have to go against that stream. And what else is this doing? Kind of highlighting how, I don't want to say stupid, but we miss things that are hidden in plain sight.
Yeah. I mean, I think most people are relevance driven as far as their cognitive processes are considered. So if it's not particularly relevant to them, the solution, but the problem is, then they're not going to go out of their way trying to spend all this time iterating against this problem. They're just going to say, all right, well, the relevant to it is I'm just going to pick it up. I'm going to carry it and I'm going to lug my way through this. Because if you're just the average person and you have a duffel bag and you're in a world where duffel bags exist exclusively, then you don't really have much of a option. It's just carry the damn thing. It's got handles. Okay. So it takes somebody who has been freed up as far as economic considerations to sit there and be like, okay, how do I take these disparate things, these small wheels, like skateboard-esque wheels and hard suitcases, and put it together? I think also a lot of it is a materials question. Like, I don't know if a lot of suitcases were like softer and made out of leather. And now that you get into the 90s and they're made out of hard plastic, well, now you have the chance to recom into something that it'll, solve the problem. Yeah.
Those are both great points. One, that reminds me that there's a book where the thesis is that leisure is the basis of all civilization, that we need this freedom, the time to reflect, the time to kick back and think. Like that luxury that we afford ourselves through economic development actually leads to further economic development, because that's when people kick back, think, invent, etc.
Classic.
Also, the materials point is important as well, which I don't think he goes into, but yeah, I was thinking about the movie Home Alone, where they're all loading into the van and they've got these, big leather boxes basically as their luggage. I don't think they had any wheels on any of that luggage. And that's late 90s, right?
And also you had porters, more people who would actually come and carry it for you.
Yeah.
When back in the day, the giant steamer trunks and like 4 guys to carry it. And now people, those same signifiers of wealth don't penetrate as deeply into the society. We have a higher level standard of living for the most part, but there's millions of more people doing that. So there aren't enough, porters in an airport to realistically transfer the amount of people who have the amount of stuff. It's like the people have the stuff now, but the stuff has become less expensive and the labor more.
Yes.
So there needs to be some kind of solution, which is put wheels on the luggage, carry your damn self.
There's a larger theme here where we shift towards self-service in the modern economy. Like we all mostly book our own travel now. Like you might have an assistant that does these things online, but back in the day, pre-internet, you had travel agents, right? Entire businesses built around just planning your trips, booking your flights, booking your hotels, mapping out your logistics. And now all of that gets compressed into the internet and people do it on their own, basically.
Yeah, and it does persist, but as a sort of luxury market, high-end soft service.
Yeah.
Actually, on a funny note, from a personal family perspective, my grandmother's family were from Chicago, and they were the first people post-Prohibition to create a self-service liquor store. It's called Williams Self-Service Liquor. And it was because my grandmother's grandfather was too lazy to walk down to the other end of the bar and get the bottles off the shelf for the customers because he had his buddies that were hanging out at the other side. And so one day he just took all the bottles off the back bar and put them out on the bar and said, grab the fucking bottle that you want and don't leave without giving me the cash.
Honor system.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was also right there with like a bat.
Yeah.
So, and then eventually it was so popular, I think in 2 days they sold out of all their liquor that they had for months.
Yeah.
And they were like, we need more. And so they just started taking the cases and putting the cases on the floor. And then people would take it out of the cases and they started putting it on shelves and boom, self-service liquor. And yeah, it started in Chicago post-Prohibition.
Sounds like the OG vending machine.
Yeah, I mean, I have a CVS in the first floor of my building that's 24 hours, and I'm just like, this is a giant walk-in vending machine with the self checkout. So, I mean, I think now plus automation. So to bring it back to Taleb, I think it's really interesting too. He says, to continue on that first thing that you brought up, it took me a lifetime to figure out the second point. He continues to say that implementation, as you said, doesn't necessarily proceed from invention. It too requires luck and circumstance. And the history of medicine is littered with strange sequences of discovery, a cure followed much later by the implementation. I think something to note here, there's so many stories, but Albert Hoffman, wait, is it Timothy Leary or Albert Hoffman? It's Albert Hoffman, the guy that discovered LSD, right? Yes. Anyways,
I think so. Yeah.
He was looking for artificial sweetener.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And tasted it and realized
had a trip.
Not artificial sweetener. But then it was used for all kinds of things like headache cures, which to this day, actually, LSD derived molecules are used for migraines for a really severe, like if you're hospitalized for migraines.
Wow.
So
it's like penicillin too, right? It was discovered by accident.
Yeah. It was at a farmer's market and he saw this like yellowy bacterial growth mold combo on a peach. And he was like, the rest of the peach is totally fine. But this one little patch of yellow mold seems to be keeping the bacteria from eating the rest of the peach so that the bacteria can eat it. And he's like, oh, so this fungus has an antibacterial thing in it, and then penicillin.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So,
these happy accidents.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've thought a lot about this sort of as like a creative technologist type of person, where the very first animations were actually like moving animations that were done by computers. So, you know, obviously Disney has been doing their thing for a long time, but in post World War II and kind of in the Vietnam era, they had these advanced targeting systems that out in California, some digital artists realized that they could use the advanced targeting systems that were basically trajectory calculators that had a graphic interface. They could use those trajectory calculators to create art.
Oh, wow.
And not just art, some of the first programmatic sort of CGI that ever existed. And they made some really cool, super psychedelic stuff. But yeah, the way that I look at it is sort of like this, where the very tip of whatever is getting invented is like hammering against what's new. And then it exists for a long time and then it disseminates out.
Yeah, it's like diffusion.
And it's keeping moving forward. So there's this like, if all of technological progress is like this blade that's cutting through time and then has this wake. And the vast majority of us are out in the wake, just kind of getting pulled along by it.
Yeah.
But there are individuals who are like, right.
The cutting edge.
The cutting edge.
Yeah. And so the distance between the cutting edge and the wake is the translational gap he's describing.
That's the dissemination.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so time is that vertical
It's
axis.
so weird, though, that the wheel, like this particular instance he gives, it must be a materials thing, like you said.
Yeah, materials, I think a lot of it also, materials also, a lot of it is context. I think there wasn't, if you had the money, you had that much stuff, you know, you could afford.
Oh, that's a good point. Air travel went from being like a luxury service to being something that's just everyone hates now, right?
And
like
there were no like 5 kilometer terminals.
Yeah.
Like whoever's designing the terminal, please stop. Like I don't want to walk for like 45 minutes to get to my gate.
That's true too. The proliferation of the actual airport spatially creates more and more of a need, right? Necessity is the mother of all invention. So you need to put some wheels on the damn suitcases so you don't give people heart attacks, basically.
I got a perfect summary. In the past, it was a problem, but it wasn't really a problem worth solving because it wasn't profitable really to solve it because the people who would pay for it, the scale wasn't there.
Yeah.
The scale wasn't there, and the people who could be incentivized to pay for it, be like, carry my own bag.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, while they're flying in their 3-piece suit.
Right,
it's a whole different
smoking
era.
a cigar.
iCoin Technology has released a slick new hardware wallet. It looks like a mini iPhone with a high-res 3-inch touchscreen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, and no GPS. It is an air-gapped hardware wallet which uses QR codes and a camera to communicate with the Bitcoin network. It has a built-in camera which is required for air-gap operation, and it has an optional Bluetooth compatibility. It's really a brand new user interface and user experience for a Bitcoin hardware wallet. iCoin makes self-custody accessible, easy to use, and non-intimidating. It even comes with an optional custom iCoin thermal printer, so you can print out the private key and its associated QR code when you're setting up the wallet. This makes setup quick and simple. Also, it is easy to restore the wallet just by reading the seed phrase QR code with the wallet camera. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like the iCoin wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. So go to iCointechnology.com/breedlove today for 30% off the purchase of this sleek new hardware wallet. Again, that's cointechnology.com/breedlove. In times of chaos, clarity can be currency. Right now, supply chains are fragile and cash flow has never been more volatile. If your business can't adapt in real time, then you're exposed. That's where NetSuite by Oracle comes in. It's the #1 cloud ERP, trusted by over 41,000 businesses for a reason. It gives you total visibility, from global shipments to real-time cash flow to the true cost of what's stuck. NetSuite consolidates accounting, finance, inventory, and human resources into one unified platform, one source of truth. With AI baked in, routine tasks get automated away so that your team can stay focused on high-leverage activities. If I were scaling a business right now, NetSuite is the system I would use. One system, full control. With NetSuite, you can tame chaos. If you're running a business doing 7 figures or more in revenue, grab their free ebook, Navigating Global Trade, 3 Insights for Leaders, at netsuite.com/whatismoney. Again, that's netsuite.com/whatismoney.
So he says this later on 190, but like a straightforward and practical testing heuristic, the simpler and more obvious the discovery, the less equipped we are to figure it out by complicated methods. The key is that the significant can only be revealed through practice. So again, putting the emphasis on praxis, where we get the word practice, which means action, that it needs to be tested in the laboratory of the market to actually see what problems people really want solved, right?
Yeah.
And this just reminded me of Bitcoin because it's elegant in its simplicity. And there's all of these Keynesian economists trying to delivering these complicated models about why it will never work. And it's just a bunch of abstract sort of circle jerking. And then in the real world, it's like, oh, it's the fastest growing asset in human history. Anyone can access it. It's, saving people from hyperinflation. It's saving billionaires from wealth redistribution. Like, it's just practically working in a way that on multiple levels and in ways that no one's theorizing could have predicted. Yet the theorists go on. They continue being suffering from Bitcoin derangement syndrome.
Well, I was watching the HBO series on John Adams recently, which is, HBO's, mixed sometimes with their output, but at least this one was pretty good, a little jingoistic. But what you realize is that they didn't know what it was going to look like. Like when they were walking in to write the Declaration and when they were working on the Constitution, they didn't know what America was going to look like. Mm-hmm. It was such a advanced next stage that there was nothing else in the world that they could really point to and say, this is this next paradigm. But they knew that it needed to have built-in rules, like really, really strong built-in rules that were extremely difficult to change. And that they didn't know what system would come of it, but that if they set the stage right, if they set the game up with the right dynamics that were untouchable, at least.
Yeah. They did their best.
They tried. It went for a good long run.
Yeah.
But that they could let it emerge and that whatever it emerged as would be ideal rather than going ahead and trying to actually produce the ideal state directly.
Right.
So I think that's the same thing with markets, is that you, with too much control and you don't allow the emergence, no control.
Yeah.
And you stifle the emergence at all.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you need that level playing field, right? Which we always go back to private property, life, liberty, property. Like if you just do those things, then leave people alone and let the emergence happen, then you get the miracles that markets are capable of producing.
And there's some evidence to support that some level of UBI as those basic ground rules does support like things like media and other forms of ingestion and creation that, I mean, at least personally, I definitely ascribe to the Carnegie concept, which he was saying, if we want to make the most amount of money, we need to make libraries free so that any smart kid, even if they're poor, can go and be smart, get educated, and contribute to our economy. The human potential aspect of it.
Isn't that what the internet is, though?
Yeah,
it's not free, but it's pretty damn close.
It's close, yeah. I'd say that, the internet is the closest we have.
I don't want to get sidetracked with UBI because you and I will fucking tangle on that one.
No, I'm just saying some form of basic support so that people can.
I agree. Like, it appeals to the humanitarian in me that we could reach a level of wealth that people would consensually donate.
Yeah, like support networks
For people that are underprivileged.
Right. The UBI in particular comes from too much oversight, but you're right.
I associate UBI with taxation.
Right.
Taxation
I'm just saying some base level of support. It could come from nonprofits. It could come from private sector. It's wherever it comes from, just as long as it's the same concept with specialization. It's like, if people are so fucking just their whole life is spent just spending like on rent and working and then doing rent, and it's like there's no space for innovation there.
Yeah. So they have no leisure.
Yeah, exactly. So it robs us of the whole benefit of the specialists. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's that's a good way to maybe summarize the point of civilization, is to afford people leisure, right? We want to automate these drudgeries away, the washing the clothes, all the things that we can automate. Let's automate them. And then let's leave our human faculties free to commit them to solving more complex problems or higher value add activities.
Yeah. We just have to value that.
Yes.
As a society.
Yes. Yeah. Which is, I would articulate that as valuing freedom. Yep. Right? Like, it is life, liberty, property is kind of the framework for that, but then it also affords you the leisure, which is like an actual form of freedom. Like, you're free to do whatever you want today. Like, you don't need to go to work. You can lay in the backyard and think and philosophize and invent whatever it may be. Okay. So there, I guess the takeaway from all of that is there is this gap, and you created a visualization that's very useful, right? The tip of the blade, the cutting edge, and then a plow, right? And then the wake or the separation occurring behind it is the diffusion of that idea into the world, into its practical use cases.
I actually see that as a visualization of all ideas, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Superimposed. And then you could sort of break it out, the superimpositions into individual technologies. But like when you take the average and you put them together,
each idea has its own cutting edge pattern. The wheel, this is kind of an extreme example he's giving, right? We discovered this thing 6,000 years ago. We didn't get it on luggage until the 20th century. But I'll read another excerpt here. This is at the bottom of 190. He said, from our discussion on rationality, we see that all we need is the ability to accept that what we have on our hands is better than what we had before. In other words, to recognize the existence of the option, or exercise the option, as people say in the business, take advantage of a valuable alternative that is superior to what precedes it, with a certain gain from switching from one into the other, the only part of the process where rationality is required. And a little further down, he writes, we saw the gap between the wheel and its use. Medical researchers call such a lag the translational gap, the time difference between formal discovery and first implementation. So I was slightly wrong there. It wasn't him using the translational gap. He was citing medical researchers using that difference. And I feel like we're living through the translational gap of Bitcoin. Obviously, the cutting edge of that technology was the Genesis block, 2009, 10? 9. I should know this. 2009 or 10. And we are in the first 15 years.
I was in high school, so
of that waking out, right? So, and like that's an interesting thing too, because obviously Bitcoin is money. What money is a bit more mysterious and complex. But now there are other things, other ideas for using Bitcoin are being brought into the marketplace, right? People are talking about using Bitcoin to create decentralized identifiers, to tokenize real world assets, et cetera, et cetera. Not that any of these problems are fully solved, but it's that same process you're describing where Satoshi releases the thing to be a digital peer-to-peer cash network. And as it diffuses into the marketplace, people start to figure out other use cases for that technology.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to the randomness and time aspect. It's just that you're going to need to have... You can't, it's a decentralized process. You can't have one person sit there and be like, I'm going to imagine every single use case.
That's right.
it has to do with just how different conditions across each person's life are different conditions.
The use cases have to be discovered.
Right.
Yeah.
Basically. And that process of discovery is something that has fascinated me my entire life, especially as somebody who kind of is like a designer working on making new things in the kind of creative tech world. It's like Steve Jobs really does, problematic guy in a lot of ways, but I do really like what he had to say, which was that once you realize that the world, all these walls that you thought were walls are not walls, they were built by other people. Mm-hmm. The amount of impact that you can make on the world suddenly radically changes.
Yeah.
Obviously that was a not direct quote, but so I think it takes people like that. And he says it takes some measure of intelligence, but it supersedes intelligence because you could be, as I said, the smartest person. That's right underneath mind the gaps. It supersedes intelligence, but it does require some intelligence to be in that seat and connect the dots between the two things and say, hey, let's put the wheels on the bottom of the suitcases.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. There's this, it's like, I think he says this later in the book, or maybe another time, maybe it's another book, but he describes this market-driven process of technology selection. He says parallels the nature-driven process of natural selection, right? Evolutionary selection. Yeah. That it really is a form of non-cognitive intelligence. Like you're just trying different solutions to the problem. You're literally throwing spaghetti at the wall. Yeah, trial and error, right? Yeah. Tinkering, as he calls it. And there is a very conservative, albeit slow, natural intelligence built into that process. Now, what we traditionally call intelligence or rationality is the term he's using here. It takes much larger leaps across design space, right? It will take bigger risk and therefore it will fail more often. But when it does succeed, it can be a major breakthrough. So this is why, evolution will produce a winged bird, but it won't produce a winged 747 jetliner. That took the addition of this other form of intelligence we're describing.
If you're anything like me, you understand that Bitcoin is something we can use every day to connect, to collaborate, and to build stronger, freer communities. As true Bitcoiners, you all know we are each responsible for onboarding more Bitcoiners. That's why I chose to partner with Cowbolt, an expense splitting app that settles in Bitcoin. It can be as simple as splitting a dinner bill. Your friend covers dinner and you reimburse them, but you send it back to him in Bitcoin. Now your friend has their first sats, and as I always say, where your money goes, the mind follows. By using Cowbolt to get Bitcoin into the hands of your friends and family, you can help us orange pill the world. Cowbolt is built to let you split costs, share expenses, and settle instantly, while always keeping full control of your keys. Cowbolt is simple, social, non-custodial, exactly how Bitcoin was meant to be used. If you're serious about Bitcoin, it's time to act like it. Download Cowbolt today on iOS or Android. To learn more, go to cowbolt.com. Again, that's Cowbolt, COWBOLT.com. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE.
I'm going to read another excerpt here. This is bottom of 191. He writes, however, it is downright irrational if one holds on to an old technology that is not naturalistic at all, yet visibly harmful, or when the switch to a new technology like the wheel on the suitcase is obviously free of possible side effects that did not exist with the previous one. And resisting removal is downright incompetent and criminal. As I keep saying, removal of something non-natural does not carry long-term side effects. It is typically iatrogenics free. So again, to revisit the term iatrogenics, hormesis is harm from the healer. So when the healer attempts to intervene and causes harm, that is iatrogenics. Okay. Hormesis is benefit from stress.
Got it. So iatrogenics is the
unintended consequences of intervention.
Right. What I did trying to options trade, basically. Yeah.
What all government action is, according to Mises.
It's the hand, the hand with the intent to help that hurts.
Exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right. So basically, I look at this, like the resistance to switching to a new technology that is obviously better, and you're holding on to an old one that
fiat.
This fiat. Yeah. It's like people are just holding on to this. It's because
they built a whole system of power that benefits them. Why would they ever be incentivized?
I know. Well, I mean, not just so much the shareholders of central banks, but the people outside of it.
Yeah.
I think it's because it's a psycho-technology that is actually integrated to your belief structures and identity. And this is why we always talk about Bitcoin being a humility test. Like, you have to be willing, as much as it's an IQ test, as much as it's an ethics test, it's also a humility test. Like, you have to be willing to admit you're wrong about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And the more successful you've been in the fiat currency or dollar paradigm, the more difficult it is to make that admission and come into that humility. So,
and I think the only way to us as, I don't want to say evangelists, but as people who are focused on spreading at least the common sense aspect of it, the best way to approach people like that is to sort of meet them with the same energy that they currently have, which is basically just to tell them it's the best performing asset in the history of humanity.
Yes.
And once they believe you, then all of those same incentives that the fiat mindset pushes you towards, push them towards Bitcoin.
That's right.
So I think that's the little kind of like gotcha moment, because at least in my experience, that was the exact data point.
Yes. Yeah. And that's something, Stack says often, right? The same thing that causes fiat currency to be debased is the same thing that causes Bitcoin to appreciate. It's the same thing. You know what it is for me? It's that appeal to Darwinian self-preservation. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously you're saying it in language, but once people get you and believe you, then it's like, oh shit, this is a matter of survival. This isn't like pick your favorite money, like spin the wheel and throw the dart at the wall.
Yeah, and graphs don't lie. So
right, and it's mathematical. Well, I mean, let's say markets don't lie.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
An actual, like, if it's assuming it's not distorted, manipulated, et cetera. If it's a free market, of course, this is an ideal we don't really have in the world, but
I'd say, if anything, the fact we don't have a free market is driving part of why Bitcoin is such a high performer.
Yeah, it's the manipulation of the free market that's causing Bitcoin to be such a successful barometer of all the bullshit.
Yeah.
But in kind of a paradoxical way, that makes Bitcoin's monetization and emergence up until this point like one of the purest expressions of a free market. It was literally just an idea in a guy's head. And now it's grown to be a $2 trillion+ asset in 15 years, like staggering. But yeah, that's a great point. Like, to appeal to people, appeal to their Darwinian self-preservation.
And the same like core cluster of concerns that fiat mindset has driven them. Like, if they're successful in the fiat game, I mean, really think about that. You have to be such a driven person to be able to stack and stack and stack in fiat, and as it's getting taken away from you and everything. So they're like laser focused on this whole idea of, what is the house price going up? What is, all of these other stocks and assets. So it's speaking to them in their language.
Yes.
And I think, it's important to do that, because it's very easy for us who are thinking, as the Bitcoin value isn't going up, the dollar is going down.
That's right.
It's easy for us to come to them with this, like, not arrogance, but just this sort of like extreme conviction that then they're just like, it makes it easy for them to.
Yeah, it's easy to stay in your frame of reference, I think. And part of grokking Bitcoin is the realization that you can choose different frames of reference, right? That the dollar does not have to be your exclusive universal frame of reference. And in fact, when you look at the world in terms of gold or in terms of Bitcoin, things look a lot different. We're not in a perpetual S&P 500 bull market. House prices aren't going up forever. Things are flat if you denominate them in gold, and things are way down if you denominate them in Bitcoin. So just like giving people that metacognitive leap to be able to step back and reframe.
Yeah. And I think this says exactly basically what you're saying, that he's saying, as a skeptical empiricist, I do not consider that resisting new technology is necessarily irrational. Waiting for time to operate its testing might be a valid approach if one holds that we have an incomplete picture of things. Yeah, so that people actually, I think the translational gap, it does have a function in a certain way. Like if you're a massive institutional investor, you want to wait until you see Bitcoin holding its value around 100K.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think again, though, that's still coming at it from this like enrichment perspective, which I think is the one that's going to be most common, especially in the beginning. But I think in the long term, the idea that it's just a tool to get wealthy, like number go up technology, is ultimately vastly reductive, super reductive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's, I think it's a matter of conservatism. Like you obviously don't want to upend your organization with every new technology that comes out, right?
Yeah.
You just jump on the bandwagon of everything that starts, because then you wouldn't be a sustainable going concern as a business, right?
Yeah, you can't plant a seed and rip it up all the time.
Exactly, yeah. Right. So there is, and I've heard some commercial real estate guys that I'm close to, they have this mantra. They say you never want to be the first guy on the block. Like you never want to be the first building breaking the new ground on the new block. It's like, or what's another way people say this? The pioneers take the arrows in the back kind of thing.
Yeah. My dad always says you want to be 6 months ahead, not 6 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great point. So there is some intelligence, wisdom, rationality, whatever term you want to use here, in not just jumping at every innovation that emerges. But then there's a gradient, right? It's like the clock starts ticking, and the more successful this thing is, the longer it's successful, the longer it continues to do what it portends to do, or what people say it will do, or what the system itself says it will do, that the burden of proof starts to flip, I guess, where it's like you're intelligent to be skeptical initially, but then as time goes on, there comes a point where it becomes almost irresponsible.
Right. And it's like people, he says, he wraps up that section on the top of 192 saying, few people want to jeopardize their jobs and reputation simply for the sake of change.
Yes, exactly.
So in the beginning, you want to be skeptical because you don't want to jeopardize your job by getting on the bandwagon in the wrong direction. Yep. But then, as you're saying, once it gets to a certain point, then you are jeopardizing your job by not accepting the change.
That's right.
So
yes. So change has this pace at which it can propagate, and this is the technology adoption curve, right? Where there's early adopters, then there's early majority, and then the early majority, late majority laggards, I think.
Right. And I mean, you see this all the time in early Bitcoin people, like the guy that sold what was it, like several
2
thousand
pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. So he was 6 years ahead, not 6 months. Yeah,
for sure. Okay. So I'm going to jump over to 194. He uses this term. He says, I'll read the excerpt. Consider two types of knowledge. The first is not exactly knowledge. Its ambiguous character prevents us from associating it with the strict definitions of knowledge. It is a way of doing things that we cannot really express in clear and direct language. It is sometimes called apophatic, but that we do nevertheless and do well. The second type is more like what we call knowledge. It is what you acquire in school, can get grades for, can codify, What is explainable, academizable, rationalizable, formalizable, theoretizable, codifiable, Sovietizable, bureaucratizable,
Harvardifable.
That's a hard word. Provable, etc. The error of naive rationalism leads to overestimating the role and necessity of the second type, academic knowledge, in human affairs, and degrading the uncodifiable, more complex, intuitive, or experience-based type. So there is, this is where heuristics matter so much, right? There is most things in life I don't think can be codified, right? We do have these rules of thumb. We have norms. It's difficult to give someone a hard and fast, like, what's the best way to go on a first date? Like, there's not a rule book for that,
Yeah, my mom just said, don't talk too much and ask her questions.
Yeah.
And then I asked too many questions, said, was this a fucking interview?
You've got 2 ears and one mouth for a reason, as my mom said. But the point, for me, it's like, there's this arrogance in academia specifically that they really over-index on that second form of knowledge.
On the first form of knowledge. Second, you're right.
Second form. They reduce the whole world into this codifiable,
that it's even possible.
Which is not possible. Yeah. I tweeted this today. It's probably a little bit rude, but I said the only thing more rare than a unicorn is an academic Keynesian economist who is not a full retard. And I truly believe this. These guys get on Twitter and they circle jerk about their mathematical models and how they need to control M2. And if they could just pull this lever and press this button and expand money over here and contract money over there, that they could like fix the world. I'm like, dude, you are so fucking full of shit and yourself that it's not even funny.
Shakespeare said it best, methinks the lady doth protesteth too much. Much ado about nothing. It's when... Actually, now I'm forgetting the exact context, but basically it's somebody who is over trying to justify that there's this natural behavior where you try to, the more that you try to justify to yourself that something is correct, the more likely that it's not.
Right. Okay.
Because it's requiring more and more rationalization and mental gymnastics to convince yourself of it. Whereas the truth is typically fairly self-apparent.
There's almost like an Occam's razor built into that, where the simple. So these guys, I don't know, and it's back to beliefs and identity structure that they've just come up in their whole career doing academic economics, whatever that even means. Actually,
it's their. First of all, I feel like the people who get into that position are the ones who could bird dog the justification rationalization process the best for the central banks, for the other economic actors that want this irrationality rationalized. So those people there's going to be a self-selecting function there. And then once they're there, then they're competing with other people to be more rationalized. It's just like, so it reminds me of the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme where it's Charlie Day with the, silver paint on his nose from huffing spray paint and, pointing at the wall full of all the strings and conspiracy theories. Like, they're like conspiracy theorists for the status quo.
Exactly.
Which is just hilarious.
That's such a great point. They're like the counter conspiracy theorists in a way.
Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few keystrokes. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with zero lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with zero long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your energy bill for 1 week per mining rig when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. And on top of this offer, you can also use code BREEDLOVE to get $100 off your first mining rig with Blockware Solutions. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. There's this saying, I hope I don't mess this up, but this comes out of Soviet Russia. I said it's very easy to be a farmer when you're 1,000 miles from the nearest farm and your plow is a pin. You know, like everything looks overly reductive and simplistic when you're in the ivory tower, just espousing ideas and frameworks and whatever. But like, you can get out there and fucking plant some crops and have some skin in the game, right? Yeah. Get feedback from nature in real time and see how difficult it actually is to grow a large plot of crops and feed millions of people.
Just to drive a tractor. Go ahead and get in the tractor and put it in gear. Like, right. Let's see how that goes.
And so we have this like inversion, which I think he's right about this, right? It's like we overvalue the second form of knowledge, and we almost don't even, we're almost unaware of the apophatic knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, to accessibilize this, it's street smarts and book smarts.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I mean, I think as a society, he might be a little bit skewed, and also we might be a little bit skewed.
I know we are. Yeah, we're skewing on the book smart, but hopefully we're touting the street smarts with the book smarts.
Yeah, well, but I think, isn't that what you're saying? That's not possible. That you can't put the street smarts into it, right?
I mean, that's what the term apophatic is. I mean, again, that's a book smart word. But you're basically saying street smarts is better than book smarts.
He says, though, it is a way of doing things that we cannot really express in clear and direct language.
Well, I know. So we've got weird words like apophatic.
Right. Apophatic. So,
but what you can do is demolish these guys using book smarts with book smarts.
Yeah, totally. Right. Yeah. But I think where this comes to a head is that it's a bias of format. It's a bias of the way that we convey information. It's like it's a format bias, and that text, since the printing press, has been the way that we disseminate across the modernity. There's billions of people on this fucking planet, and being able to show them exactly how to do something was very difficult. I think up until YouTube, because now you don't have to put it into words. You can just record yourself doing it.
That's a good point.
And like, I love to cook. So my cooking has gotten so much better watching YouTube videos where it's just my shout out Kenji Lopez Alt. He just puts a GoPro on his head and cooks and tells stories. Yeah. And you just watch what he's doing. And then you're like, oh, you got to wait until the bubbles look like this. And you could write that all out.
No, it's too hard to follow. Yeah.
You'd have to already have that, apophatic knowledge.
Yes.
In order to understand what you're reading.
Yes.
It's like saying it smelled like watermelon, reading it smelled like watermelon. If you've never smelled watermelon, you got to know what the fuck idea it's saying.
Yes. That's such a good point. Vervaeke, again, he calls this propositional knowing, right? What you can codify in words and such. And then there's all the other levels of knowing that can't be codified in that way. The perspectival, the procedural, and the participatory levels of knowing, which you can see on video, right? Or it's at least much closer to the real thing. Yeah.
Well, then I think the next step, which is something that is only just now sort of getting to scratch the surface, is the interior spiritual knowledge, which I feel like, at least on psychedelics, part of why it's so difficult to describe what you learned is because it's not necessarily even apophatic. It's this like third thing that you have this really intense feeling of knowing, except there's literally no way to put it in words because what you learned is not something that is really material necessarily. You could go and I think a lot of people who were inspired by psychedelic experiences then quest for like the rest of their life to try to like translate what they learned into, words. Be Here Now, great example. Ram Dass. It's not just words, it's diagrams. It's
art.
Art. Art. Ultimately. Yeah.
No, that's a good point. For me, we just return to the limitations of natural language, right? And again, academics live in this sort of paradigm where it's all, everything can be reduced to this natural language game, right? They can tell the farmers how to farm and the scientists how to science and all this stuff from the ivory tower.
It's the justification for their existence. Yeah.
It's and not the ultimacy of their existence, right? Like they deserve the top floor in the ivory tower when in reality, they should be at the bottom floor, right? It's the people that have been doing, the farmers that have been growing crops for thousands of years. They know how to farm. Let them farm. If you want to be an academic, you want to be a theoretician, that's great, but stay in your lane, bro.
Yeah.
That does not mean you get to control everyone else just because you think you're book smart, right?
100%. I mean, something to note though is like agricultural institutes are typically a giant farm. So for the things that it is really important as part of the learning process, and for things like farming, which are basically a pillar of our entire civilization.
Yes, of course.
So you see it in the things that are really the most important. So like airplane mechanics, it's a lot of hands-on learning.
Yeah.
So there is a way to combine hegemony with apophatic dissemination of knowledge in a positive way. I mean, think blacksmiths, apprentices, trades.
There it is. The apprenticeship. Rather, it's just like this. You can read as many manuals as you want on swimming. You can read them for 100 years. And if you
might drown,
and if you haven't swam, then it's not going to do you any good, right? So that apprenticeship, that direct transfer of embodied knowledge, like person to person, that matters a lot. But that cannot be substituted out for this academic thing, right?
Yeah, purely. I mean, I went to film school or got a film degree at a liberal arts college, and before you ever even work with the camera, before you even ever work with the camera, you have to watch all these other movies and learn about the theory of cinema and all these other things, and then they're like, okay, now go make a movie.
Yeah,
and you're like, what's an SD card?
Yeah.
And what is lighting? Is Kelvin warmer the higher it goes or cooler the higher it goes?
Yeah.
And it's so you're right. And these academic ivory towers often will produce people who go out into the world with all of the confidence and like none of the skills.
Yes.
Although I will say there is value. It's not like there's no value in learning the theory either.
Of course not.
Because then it allows you to self-direct your practical learning.
That's right.
In a more informed way.
Yes.
So there is value to it. It's not like everybody should just quit their jobs and go, drop out of school and go study to be an electrician or something.
It's just holding theory and praxis in their proper domains.
Yeah, I mean, well, then let's jump back to the Baconian linear model.
Sorry, real quick before that, just to reinforce the point you just made, because that same dynamic holds true even in abstract professions like accounting, which I was in. When I first got into accounting out of college, right, I got my master's degree in accounting and finance. I go to work at an accounting firm, and the guy's just like, all you know is debits and credits. You don't know anything about working in an accounting firm. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I just spent 5 years in school. That's the first thing you're going to tell me? But they're right.
Yeah.
You don't know anything about working in the real world in accounting from the theory you learned in college. Now, the theory is useful, right? It's a scaffolding on which to apply your practical lessons or something, but it's a whole different game.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I think it's the difference between knowing that a six-sided dice, like a dice has 6 sides, 1 through 6. It's like knowing that the output could be 1 through 6, but then never throwing it. Like you have to throw it and see which side it lands on so that the materiality manifests on the potentials. And you can learn about the potentials all day long.
And further, you need to lose some money throwing that fucking die before you really feel the pain of the consequences of what it is.
Yeah, I've never options trading again, guys.
Sorry, you were going to...
No, yeah. So, but we're talking about this pipeline, basically, or linear model is another way you could look at it, of how traditionally people have thought that it goes from academia to applied science and technology to practice. So he's saying, while this model may be valid in some very narrow but highly advertised instances, such as building the atomic bomb, the exact reverse seems to be true in most domains I've examined. Practice leads to applied science and technology, which then gets codified by academia.
Exactly.
So it may be that academia helps science and technology, which in turn helps practice, but in unintended, non-teleological ways, we will see later. In other words, he does. It's so weird when he does an aside at the end of a paragraph.
Yeah.
In other words, it is directed research that may well be an illusion, right? So it's like, I'm not the biggest Elon fan in the world, but he does have there's a decent point that he made. It's like the first step is figuring out whether or not what you're doing makes sense. It's not the first step isn't actually figuring out how to do it. It's figuring out if what you're about to go do even makes sense in the first place.
Yeah.
And I won't credit that to Elon Musk, but he did popularize it.
Yeah. And this gets to the title of the chapter, which is Lecturing Birds on How to Fly. And so I'll just read. It's kind of a long excerpt, but I think it's central to the chapter. He says, let us return to the metaphor of the birds. Think of the following event. A collection of hieratic, I don't know what that means, persons from Harvard or some such place lecture birds on how to fly. Imagine bald males in their 60s, dressed in black robes, officiating in a form of English that is full of jargon, with equations here and there for good measure. The bird flies. Wonderful confirmation. They rush to the Department of Ornithology, which is the study of birds, I think, to write books, articles, and reports stating that the bird has obeyed them, an impeccable causal inference. The Harvard Department of Ornithology is now indispensable for bird flying. It will get government research funds for its contribution.
That's cracking up.
And a little further down, he writes, so the sequence here, which he has in the book, mathematics leads to ornithological navigation, and wing flapping technologies leads to ungrateful birds fly.
Right.
It also happens...
I was just gonna say, so that just so people following along, that same sequence mirrors the academia, applied science and technology to practice.
Exactly.
So the academia is mathematics. The applied science technology is the biology of describing how birds navigate in wing flaps. Yes. And then the practice is the bird flying. So he's using this example to illustrate how it is indeed, and very common sense, understood that it is very much the opposite.
Yeah, the reverse is what's true, right? It's the birds. Obviously, birds fly. Right. They don't give a shit about us lecturing them. It also happens that birds write no such papers and books, conceivably because they are just birds, so we never get their side of the story. Meanwhile, the priests, the academics, keep broadcasting theirs to the new generation of humans who are completely unaware of the conditions of the pre-Harvard lecturing days. Nobody discusses the possibility of the birds not needing lectures, and nobody has any incentive to look at the number of birds that fly without such help from the great scientific establishment.
Wow.
Bitcoin custody is evolving. Both self-custody and single third-party custody come with significant risk and trade-offs. Onramp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your setup. Onramp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-sig vault, guarded by 3 independent institutional-grade custodians, none of which that have unilateral control over your assets. More than just security, Onramp simplifies inheritance and estate planning, ensuring your Bitcoin wealth moves seamlessly to your loved ones without the risk and complexities of self-custody. Easily designate beneficiaries right in the Onramp dashboard, eliminating the need for unreliable treasure maps or other complex key sharing schemes. You can also avoid the probate process and ensure your heirs receive their Bitcoin securely with legal title transfers designed to keep your wealth intact for generations. As Bitcoin continues to appreciate, Onramp helps you seamlessly access financial services, from inheritance and insurance to trading, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security. And importantly, the onboarding process is fast and frictionless. I set up my own Onramp account, and it was far easier than dealing with hardware wallets or traditional self-custody setups. The team walked me through everything step by step, making sure I had a secure, reliant setup for my Bitcoin wealth. Secure your generational wealth with confidence. Schedule a consultation with the Onramp team today at onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove.
All right, so I'll jump in with an excerpt on 196. Taleb is about halfway down the page. Taleb writes, as per the Yiddish saying, if the student is smart, the teacher takes credit. These illusions of contribution result largely from confirmation fallacies. In addition to the sad fact that history belongs to those who can write about it, whether winners or losers, a second bias appears as those who write the accounts can deliver confirmatory facts, what has worked, but not a complete picture of what has worked and what has failed. For instance, direct research would tell you that what has worked from funding, like AIDS drugs or some modern designer drugs, not what has failed. So you may have the impression that it fares better than random. We talked about this yesterday, right? The seen versus the unseen and the broken window fallacy, that this is part of the, this is the first thing Henry Hazlitt touches in his book, Economics in One Lesson, which is excellent. The difference between the seen and the unseen. I'll just mention the broken window fallacy one more time. Hooligan breaks a window. Someone who's economically ignorant thinks, oh, great, the glassmaker now has a job that he otherwise wouldn't have had. So that means the broken window increased economic activity. But what you don't see is what the owner of the window would have spent the money on or invested the money in had he not had to repair the window.
And you also don't see the lack of human potential realized in the hooligan.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
That's the flip of it too.
That's right. That's absolutely correct. Sides. That's absolutely correct. This is, I don't know that this is axiomatic in economics, but the non-productive or the destructive activity, the time and effort spent breaking that window is time and effort not spent producing something that people, solving a problem, basically. You're creating a problem rather than solving a problem. So therefore you've decreased the aggregate problem-solving capacity, a la the productivity of the human race in every act of destruction. And so, but it's hard because what we were talking about yesterday, it's hard to communicate that to people because all we have is the abstract, the unseen. And what people see is the guy fixing the window. I'm like, what are you talking about? The guy has a job. We literally increased the number of jobs. Look at the guy fixing the window right now. And so this seems to be the struggle of actual economics in a way, is to get people to take the unseen seriously, things that can actually be deduced from the axiom of action. And
yeah, I mean, a really simple analogy would just be you use this one, digging a hole and filling it back up.
yes,
You did stuff, but unless you buried something in that hole, you have just returned it to the state that it was in originally and wasted the time in doing so. So fixing the window is like filling the hole.
that's right. It was already fixed.
That was already, the ground was fine as it was.
Yes.
You didn't need to dig the hole and fill it back up. I do think, though, in the broken window fallacy, it does have to be acknowledged that there is additional economic harm in the individual who's breaking the window.
That's right.
Yeah, that, let's say they get arrested and carted off, and they could have been a great writer if the society situation was different, or like if there was a little bit more stability out there for individuals whose, I don't know, maybe their parents were drug addicts or whatever. That doesn't mean that they don't have the inherent like human potential to be a Steve Jobs or whatever.
Well, they had access to that hypothetical library you talked about earlier, right?
Maybe it wasn't hypothetical for a long time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, just the idea that, and look, okay, I broke stuff when I was a young teenager too, right? We've all been hooligans probably at one point in our life or another, but
I liked matches. That was my thing.
Yeah, that's scary. Getting those kids like a proportionate penalty for their activities and then trying to get them back on track is kind of what you want to do, right? You want to stop being a destructive member of society, start being a productive member of society. And what is this, the unseen effects of this? Like that's pretty obvious, but the guy who had his window broken, he was basically stolen from.
Yeah,
right?
so we've established that part. Yeah.
So he was a producer, but now he's disincentivized from producing because part of the fruit of his labor was stolen through the broken window. So there's one disincentivization for production, but then the other side of it is, and now if the stealing were to pay, which is what basically the state is, if that glass window breaker were being paid to break windows, you have this other incentivization for destruction, which is also counterproductive in an economic sense. So
then it's even more force that it's like you're
double.
riding with the e-brake on, basically, at that point. Yeah.
Exactly. Counterproductive in a real sense.
Yeah. Still moving forward, but you're destroying the discs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what is the point of that? It's like, oh, well, he says it here. So the illusion grows and grows with government funding, tax dollars, swelling and self-feeding, bureaucracies in Washington, all devoted to helping birds fly better. And this is what we have. We have a bunch of intellectually masturbating academic economists and other theorists that think they can pass laws, regulations, decrees, etc., to cause society or force society, to be more accurate with my language, to do things that they think society should be doing.
Yeah. So what is it? It's cultural engineering,
Social engineering.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a tale as old as time. Who was it that was saying that? Was it Chase Hughes that said that the next battleground is the mind?
I feel like the battleground's always been the mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like even when the battleground is the battleground is the mind, like morale and disillusion, strategy.
Yeah.
I guess it's just that the battlefield has gone from being a distinct area to just the surface of the earth.
To just the whole, Well, now that all of our minds are interconnected with internet, money, et cetera, because again, like even in a real battleground, if you can anticipate your opponent's maneuvers, well, that's the power to win. Like if you can always out anticipate, you always know what he's going to do.
Enigma, World War II, Turing.
Exactly. The movie, The Imitation Game. This is what chess is like, right? Like if you see that, if you can think one step ahead or see around the proverbial corner, well, then that's the power to win, whether it's a physical conflict or a mental conflict. So what do we say about all that? Academics, just be very skeptical of academia. Very skeptical of fiat politicians.
I'd say like one of the takeaways is do. Be as your philosophy is very praxis oriented. Try to just do it. Even if you think you don't know, you learn in doing in a lot of cases. So just stop with the self-limiting beliefs and the kind of, and in a way, actually humble yourself to the process and just acknowledge that there are some things that you can't know in advance and that you have to, if anything, I would say learn to love the process of this discovery.
Yes.
Learn to get excited by the little nuggets that you of efficiency or of insight that you get by doing, and try to forget that, you know, you're not necessarily making quote unquote progress. Maybe stop. Just, you know, it's good to be outcome oriented, but it can also lead you down paths of presupposition of the outcome. So I'd say, you know, fall in love with the process, have some kind of idea of a direction, but not necessarily be so outcome oriented. Be outcome agnostic with a focus on praxis and learning and doing, and you know, have your North Star, but don't tell yourself you know what direction north is, because it might not be.
Yeah, it's subject to change, right? Like we need, again, the level playing field. We need the fundamental assumptions, which I always distill into life, liberty, property. Like we're not going to kill each other. We're not going to steal from each other. We're not going to incarcerate one another unjustly. And then the rest, you sort of just want to leave people free to engage in this discovery process. That's not just a social prescription. That's like an internal prescription as well. Like, don't be so, you can tyrannize yourself, right? You can think, oh, I'm so certain about this one thing and nothing can shake me from this. And that's going to blind you to a lot of the options that Taleb is describing here, as you get optionality blindness when you're over committed to one outcome or one idea, basically.
And I think that is embracing optionality. I think there's a certain level, not necessarily of like Christian faith, but faith in the universe, faith in the way things work. Yeah. You guys were talking about this a lot.
The act of openness to the unknown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is its core to antifragility. It's without that, you can't have antifragility.
Yeah. Well, because all discoveries by definition come from the unknown. If you're closed off to the unknown, then you're not going to learn anything, right? What's another way of saying this?
I discovered a book.
Well, another way of saying this is you can't have a real conversation with someone unless you presuppose that they have something you can learn from them, right? If you think if I sit down at this table with you and I think there's nothing I can learn from you, then how are we going to have a conversation?
Then you'd be what's known as a dick.
A dick, exactly. You'd just be a fucking intellectual tyrant. And you're just like, no, that's wrong. No, that's wrong. And it's the openness.
And the fact is, it is very much factual. From 80 IQ to 170, literally every single person on Earth. It might not be super fascinating, but quite literally every single person knows something that other people don't.
Of course.
Like just
of course.
Inherently.
Yes.
And if you become blind to that, then a lot of the, I would say, sort of like divine power of human connection just like gets lost.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're cutting yourself off from the power of the logos, right? That information and learning can't flow through language from others to you, whether that is words, prices, whatever it is. If you're not open to receiving that information, then you are a totalitarian mindset and you've ossified. There's a saying that when you're finished changing, you're finished.
Yeah.
Right. You've
it's over.
rigidified into this maladaptive creature that is going to go extinct. 100, like with that, you can be certain of.
And do probably a lot of damage along the way.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And just very briefly, because we're going to move on, but in Buddhism and in Hinduism, more Hinduism, but there's the concept of Atman, that that the big highest cosmic consciousness,
the one,
is in a spark of that is in every single living being. And if you don't acknowledge that, then you are literally shunning God.
You're turning away
the
from
universe,
God.
the highest, best, most unifying, powerful force that life can.
Yes. And if I may translate, because I've been working on a book on this a lot, I think the Atman, what the author Robert Pirsig in his book Leela calls the pre-intellectual cutting edge of reality, right? That there is this, it's before you categorize anything, it's before anything goes into the intellectual process. There's just the raw experience of presence, basically. Mm-hmm. I think this is also very closely related to the human action and praxeology of Mises, right? That there is this, it is the primary ontological ultimate reality, that you are alive and you are engaged in action, and there is an infinite amount of things to learn, basically, because you can't possibly contain it all. If you respect that and take it seriously, you get a dose of radical humility, right? And you become resistant to all of these language games where these people are basically, here's the whole truth, and these ideas are so good, I'm going to coerce you into adopting them. And if you haven't, and this is why, like, I think a faith in God or a faith in Atman or a faith in praxis, if you want to be super practical about it, is so critical, because it inoculates you against those fucking language games. These guys, it is impossible to have a final solution or a final answer or any construct of totalizing knowledge whatsoever. All we can say, if I may quote the great Mises, is that man must act. And back to that visual you painted earlier, right? The cutting edge, that it is the source of all ideas. There's a saying, I don't know, this might have been in Buddhism, I'm not sure. Because the Atman equals the Neoplatonic one equals God, which I think equals action of Mises, but that's getting into the book.
Yeah, that the Big Bang was the initial action that set everything into.
Yeah, well, it's so like even subject-object duality, which we take to be real in the Cartesian worldview, is not real, right? Like there is no subject in here and object out there. There's a continuum between the two. We separate them into two categorical structures that help us decomplexify the world and deal with it. But that doesn't mean it's real. The map is not the territory, right? And if you understand that, then you are protected against these people that use word salad to manipulate you. And I say this to get to the point of word salad, hopefully. It's a
perfect example of this. Car mechanics.
Okay.
You drive into the shop. You don't know what's wrong with your car. Sounds weird, not working right.
Yeah.
You got zero tools to understand the objective state of the engine.
Yes.
The mechanic has all of the tools and can tell you whatever the fuck he wants.
Yes, and charge you whatever.
And charge you basically whatever you want. That's why you want to find a good, trustworthy.
This is why you want market competition.
And market competition. Yeah. But then again, even in the market, if they all do that.
Well, that's not market competition. That's collusion.
Right. But then actually I'll ask you a question. Like, what if the way that the asymmetry of the interaction is set up just naturally leads to almost everybody taking advantage of that asymmetry?
Well, when they do take advantage of that asymmetry in a market economy, they're creating an opportunity for new competitors to come in, undercut the pricing, still have a profit, and be closer to the truth, basically.
Right.
So price discovery leads to truth discovery.
Yeah. I just feel like it is such a universal thing with mechanics. And it is so hard to find that guy who will do that work. And they're not necessarily able to scale the same way because they're actually charging less for the same amount of labor time.
Yeah.
Even though that's what the actual market value is. So it's hard to find a good mechanic for a reason.
Of course it is.
But also they would be less incentivized to do that if fiat.
Well, they know you can take your business elsewhere.
Yeah. Right. Well, that you could take your business elsewhere, and also they'd be less incentivized if it wasn't such a focus on them needing to make as much money from every single interaction as possible. They're trying to
outpace inflation and all that.
Right.
So correct. And I want to also say that I don't think market competition is the sole solution to this. We do need moral codes, right? Which traditionally come from religion. Like, do they have to? I don't know. But the fact that we can go out into the world and cooperate with strangers with a reasonable expectation, no one's going to steal from us or kill us. Like, of course you got to be careful and you got to take security measures and all that. But like, I mean, we live in a big city, and this is more true in big cities, but you can go out into the city and you can walk into a store with a piece of plastic. You can get goods and services, and they're probably not going to shoot you and probably not going to steal your stuff, right? Like that's an amazing thing.
Pretty awesome. Yeah.
The market economy supports that a lot, but not totally, right? You also need kind of some moral norms.
Yeah.
And the extent to which those are generated by the market economy, I don't know. That's an open question.
Mimesis at that point. And then especially if you have something that's backed by a corrupt foundation, like unsound money.
Yes.
Then you have people who are rising to the top and then culturally setting the new standards for mimetic self-reproduction.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I do definitely ascribe to the fix the money, fix the world principle. It's just going to be like, what does that renewal period look like? And are the people who benefited from the previous unjust system going to have enough power to carry it into the new one and maintain?
Yeah. They're definitely going to have a head start.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you're a shareholder in a central bank and you can literally print money or profit from money printing and you can use that to buy Bitcoin, well, then you get a huge leg up in the next game. But in the same, it's terrible. But what else can you do?
Yeah, that's true.
I say that's the situation, but maybe the hope or the silver lining perhaps is that there's that saying that, what is it? A man struggles to understand that which his paycheck depends on him not understanding. I do think a lot of these shareholders of central banks, for lack of a better circumscription of people, of a cohort, they will be the last to the table, basically, because you've been on top for so long. You talk about living in the ivory tower.
If you're listening to this podcast, you probably get it. You get that Bitcoin upends everything that state-sponsored schools teach us about money. For those who get the importance of Bitcoin, it is important that we have a smart way to buy and hold Bitcoin. My friends at Coinbits, the oldest Bitcoin-only exchange in the United States, have pioneered the concept of roundups, which converts your spare change into Bitcoin. Simply connect your credit or debit cards, and your usual purchases are rounded up to the nearest dollar, letting you stack sats on every purchase without even thinking about it. Coinbits also provides a terrific self-custody experience. Connect a hardware wallet for automatic withdrawals into cold storage to minimize your risk and stay sovereign over your Bitcoin. My favorite Coinbits feature is Coinbits Plus, which gives you the best exchange rate on Bitcoin. It even gives you real-time feedback on how well you are doing on your savings plan. With Coinbits Plus, power users can save more money to buy even more Bitcoin. All that, plus peer-to-peer cash and Bitcoin payments, target orders, price alerts, and more means Coinbits can help you do almost anything you need to do with Bitcoin. So go to coinbits.app/breedlove to sign up today. Again, that is Coinbits, BITS.app/breedlove. So there's a very special place called the farm at Okefenokee. It's a 1,000-acre regenerative farm community about 45 minutes northwest of Jacksonville, Florida. The farm is a completely off-grid community. It has total food, water, and energy independence. Everything on the farm is 100% organic, and it even features wild boar and bear hunting. The farm at Okefenokee is right next to the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, where you can do camping and canoeing tours. So if you're like me and you're interested in the self-sovereign lifestyle, then you can get your own lot on the farm at Okefenokee if you tell them that I sent you. Once you get a lot, you can build one of 3 custom cabin options. So if you value freedom, self-sovereignty, and living in touch with nature, then join me and my family. We have lot number 21, and we're going to be building a cabin there starting December 2025. To learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okefarm.com and make sure to tell them that I sent you.
I want to go back, just takeaways from this chapter.
Yeah.
Word salad. And as someone that's been accused of word salad many times, like I don't say this lightly, be skeptical of word salad. Yeah. Like these fucking guys, these academic economists specifically are the ones I'm focused on. I'm sure there's many others, like all the DEI and woke academics, all that nonsense. Make fun of them. Make fun of them. Call them out. Call out this stupid, and when they say shit and they try to mathematize or overcomplicate things or over jargonize things, call them out. Like, what the fuck are you saying? What does that mean?
The worst case scenario, you just come to a better understanding of their position.
You'll see that there's no wizard behind the curtain,
right?
At some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a big question, which is to say, are the people who get wrapped up in this, in the word salad, the victims of the word salad, become perpetrators of the word salad,
unconsciously,
or subconsciously, and they don't necessarily. I don't see a ton of culpability within that individual. I see somebody who, given the right circumstances of being explained and having the apophatic, having this apophatic experience, then they would likely change their mind. It's just that the dominant form of information dissemination is non-apophatic and is text-based and is Twitter threads or X threads, and people taking crazy photos with giant press on nails for attention while banging Megan Fox, which is just interesting. I mean, to me, it's all media showmanship. 99.9%.
Yeah. I think it's social engineering or mimetic engineering.
Who's to say those two things are not very deeply connected?
Well, I think they are. I'll share my LLM investigation with you later. But
Great. I'm sure ChatGPT has a lot to say.
Well, I had to specifically direct ChatGPT to be anti-woke because it was trying to defend wokeism, of course. So definitely not a neutral agent.
I mean, the history of wokeism and woke stuff is actually pretty interesting. It's like it was around the Occupy Wall Street time when 2009 woke just meant that you were aware of the money printer, that you were aware that the state was not a good state, that America was not the good guy, and you were waking up, coming out of the matrix, basically. And they found that there were people who were very left and people who were very right, who were both waking up, becoming woke. And what they wanted to do was poison the well and fracture the left-right unity by saying, hey, let's change this word from meaning awakened to the matrix to whatever it's come now, which, I'm not going to necessarily sit here and like dunk on people who in a fiat clown world, because everybody's just trying to figure it out for themselves. But ultimately, it was a very conscious thing to sort of like poison the well when it came to specifically the word woke, which, I mean, it's like
the term was co-opted.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd say in the original definition, like, we're trying to help people get woke.
The Great Awakening.
But but so words are powerful, and it's interesting, at least word salad getting to the difference between what it actually is.
Yes.
And then in the mimetic sort of self-reproductive way, how it's used, and how a lot of the time we'll think that the latter is actually the reality, when the truth is that you cannot just take, as he's saying, things on word value.
Yes.
You have to see what it's actually all about.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say about Occupy Wall Street, I heard this secondhand, but the originator of that movement later said, someone could fact check me on this, that in retrospect, he realized he occupied the wrong thing. He shouldn't have occupied Wall Street. He should have occupied the Fed.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So again, there's this.
Right. Wall Street was the front organization. I always talk
about like Marxism, like properly prescribing the problem. Like, oh, there's a lot of wealth inequality and class division and all these problems. And then it described the problem, and it prescribed the exact wrong solution. Well, let's just abolish private property, when the real answer, in my opinion, is perfect private property, make it very strong, give everyone that level playing field, basically. I think Occupy Wall Street was something similar, right? They described the problem correctly, right? There's corruption in the financial system, but then they prescribed occupying Wall Street. Now, Wall Street has plenty of problems, basically, but Wall Street, as we understand it, is symptomatic of central banking. It's symptomatic of the Fed.
It's the obvious
Yes.
It's the
It's the leaves rather than the root.
right. Exactly. They were, and it's because the Fed is obfuscated.
Yes.
That they have purposefully made the average American think that Wall Street controls all this stuff,
Yes.
when really Wall Street is simply the beneficiaries / kind of like incentivizers, lobbyers. They're the sharks eating at the corpse of the whale.
That's right.
And it's like trying to say, hey, you sharks, stop eating the whale corpse, when in reality you should be going after the harpooners
The Fed
up
is
on
the
the surface
harpooner.
who are stabbing them.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, no, yeah, that's basically it, right? And again, having the humility to understand that this is all really complex and that people have done this plenty of times, properly describing the problem and improperly prescribing the solution. I'm not saying we are immune to this. Like, obviously, Bitcoin is touted as a major solution to all of this. Could we be wrong? Sure. Like, please present some sound arguments as to why that might be the case. One of the things, there's many things that make me very bullish on Bitcoin, but one of the things is that there are no coherent intellectual arguments against Bitcoin that make any sense whatsoever. There's no ethical arguments against it. There's no good intellectual arguments against it.
Yeah, I mean, when people say water use for fresh water use for the data centers, it's like one transaction is 0.5 of a liter of water. And if you eat a diet that's derived exclusively from plants and not omnivorous, like you don't incorporate eggs and dairy and stuff, 5,000 liters of water a day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not to say one's better or worse. It's just to say that argument that we're using potable water and that's an issue, et cetera. The fact is we're human. In order to do our functions, we need water.
Yeah.
And if anything, this will make desalination technology a lot less expensive, drive innovation in a field that otherwise we are just like, when people dunk on ChatGPT, which it's easy to do, there's plenty to dunk on LLMs. They're not, when everybody's going crazy saying the AI, it's like, all right. But the fact is that we need to drive technology to be the solution here. And right now, if we're just going to maintain our current system, especially agriculturally, it is massively inefficient. Mm-hmm. And if we can drive efficiencies in other sectors, we can bring those back and actually solve these seemingly unsolvable problems. Mm-hmm. I mean, just for instance, like imagine instead of using up so much land to grow crops, you could have vertical farms. Mm-hmm. And the vertical farm is this giant cylinder that's like as tall as the Sears Tower. Mm-hmm. And all of Chicago, it eats from this automated, and on the inside of the column is a giant AI robot with tens of thousands of arms that are moving around, harvesting, et cetera. And it's like, would you rather have that? Or would you rather, clear cut the Amazon? Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, if we don't advance AI, if we don't advance robotics, we are just saying, okay, we're cool cutting down the Amazon when those gains in efficiency could completely, revolutionize the way that our society is operated. I mean, at least personally, I think the better, faster, cheaper thing could get to the point where you don't need to be rich to have an incredible life, where robots are growing fresh fruit and, but what that requires is sound money, because otherwise they're just going to inflate. And it doesn't matter if the good or service is on paper not using that much energy to be produced. They will rip you off for as much as they possibly can.
That's right.
Because they're incentivized to.
Yeah.
But I think really it's, even without that, without the inflationary thing, you would still have people ripping each other off in a sound money economy. That's where I think so much of it is cultural.
Yeah.
Like you really do have to say mimetically, the people that do this are bad. Maybe they're not going to go to jail, but we fucking hate them.
Well, it
don't
should be
like this
financially
asshole.
penalized, right? It's proportionality. So if you financially rip someone off, there should be a financial penalty. And Rothbard lays this out in his book, Ethics of Liberty. It's not just 1-to-1, right? If I steal a piece of chewing gum from your convenience store, my penalty should be 2 pieces of chewing gum, actually. 1 to restore the deficit and then 1 for the penalty, basically. So proportionality doesn't mean 1-to-1. There's actually a little bit more thought that goes into it. But largely, by the way, the thing about water for Bitcoin transactions, that's the exact same argument for energy, right? It's like these are people, free market actors that have rendered useful labor into the market economy to earn money. They're now spending that money to buy, whether you're using the Bitcoin network or you're playing video games or you're using an LLM, you are spending money consensually to obtain the energy, water, and whatever else is necessary to run that software.
Yeah.
And so you can't say that's wasteful, right? It doesn't make sense, right? That's a value judgment. That's me saying, hey, Mike, I think you saving in Bitcoin is wasteful. That's my opinion. Okay. Your opinion doesn't matter in the market economy. What matters is human action and consent. It's where opinions kind of go to battle, actually, right? Someone thinks, oh, this business is going to be big. Business A will be big. Someone else thinks business B will be big. Well, then they put their chips where their ideas are, and you let the market sort out those opinions and turn them into the facts of economic reality. So
ideally, without manipulation, without all the games that people play.
But yeah, and that's all we're saying with Bitcoin ultimately is like, let's minimize the manipulation that's possible.
Yeah.
Minimize the attack surface for manipulation. And so, yeah, then maybe we can wake up from this hallucination that there are these academic high priests that we really need to tell us how to organize into society or to lecture birds how to fly. It's just not real. It's the tail wagging the dog, putting the cart before the horse, whatever metaphor you want to use. I think Taleb's done an excellent job of debunking it. And again, make fun of these guys. Press them on what they're saying. Ask them to speak about it in plain language. Yes. You will quickly see that the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah. I mean, he closes out the chapter lecturing birds how to fly with a passage I'll read real quick. The real world relies on the intelligence of antifragility, but no university would swallow that. Mm-hmm. Just as interventionists don't accept that things can improve without their intervention. Let us return to the idea that universities generate wealth and the growth of useful knowledge in society. There is a causal illusion here. Time to bust it. Mm-hmm. And he goes on to the next chapter, basically saying, cut this out, Greg. I'm looking. Now the emperor has no clothes as me. Sorry. So. Because I'm blanking a little bit on chapter 14. He basically says, oh yeah, here we go. All right, we're back in. That education equals wealth and economic growth. That you need to educate first, and that wealth and economic growth will come from that educated populace. When in reality, wealth and economic growth allows for education. Yeah. In the same exact we were talking about before with the surplus of time leisure. And energy, the leisure effect.
And I think by extension, we could say that it's probably true of culture as well. Now, again, I don't know. We have some evidence of this historically when, say, there was cultural and artistic flourishing on the gold standard. In France, they called it La Belle Époque. In the West, or in the United States, we called it the Gilded Age. Mm-hmm. Like there were times where sound money, economic flourishing led to cultural flourishing. Now, is that the exclusive contributor? Probably not, but there definitely are links.
And I would say, what markers are we really looking at of said cultural growth? Because at that same time, there were extreme issues also. I mean, you can look at incredible cathedrals and these unbelievable works.
Beauty.
But then you also kind of hits you that they did have to amass this from some, like, you go back and you look at that period of time, and the inequality that's there is pretty striking as well.
Inequality is not something we should be targeting because it's not possible. Again, to be specific, Equality of the rules, the level playing field.
Right.
Yes. Equality of outcome, equality of opportunity. I don't think these things are possible.
Totally. Yeah. I'm not necessarily suggesting that they like had some mandate to not have it there. But I guess I just want to point towards the fact that a lot of that money was put into insane cultural projects, which were the markers of a golden age when culturally it was like they were wanting to do public works that were ultimately self-serving. They wanted to go sit in that cathedral. They wanted to feel like that they had connected to this higher power and that everything around them was constructed from their labor and the labor around them, which is a valid thing. I'm not going to like take that away from them, but it is ultimately something that like you have to acknowledge when, you know, you have men's clubs in Manhattan that have, you know, like 70-ton marble columns and gilded ceilings. And you think you're like, whoa, this is a private club for like 8,000 people. How cool would it be if, you know, from the Carnegie approach, it's like those who have the innate capacity should be able to participate, I guess is.
Yeah. And I mean, that's my vision of the free market economy, is that it causes the proliferation, democratization, whatever you want to call it, availability of more things like that, right? That you end up with more of these very luxurious, like basically you're making everyone more rich. This is what increasing. Yeah. I don't want to use GDP, but GDP per capita, productivity per capita. That's what it is. I would push back a little on the cathedral thing. Like the guys laying those bricks on the foundations of those cathedrals knew that they would never sit in that cathedral. Right. These were 300-year projects or more. So,
but even if they were on, the bricklayers weren't necessarily the people who were even culturally, they would be able to sit in it, but they weren't going to be sitting in the front, even if they were people that built it.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I just think maybe we get less obsessed with relative position in the hierarchy, the more we can have the tide that rises all hierarchies.
Exactly. Yes.
You know, then you'd be like, you'd be fine being a bricklayer if you know, well, my kids get to go to college. They get to have a better life than I had. There's upward mobility. There's sound rules. You know, if my son wants to study to be a lawyer or a doctor, that path is accessible to them. Yeah. If not, if they want to be a bricklayer, they could still have a pretty good outcome like I've had. It's these like basic ingredients of giving people hope, right? The opportunity for forward or upward mobility, whichever metaphor you want to use. That seems to be essential. And I think Bitcoin is an essential ingredient to that.
Yeah. It's lowering the barrier to entry, not necessarily pumping people up so that they can artificially cross it.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So
better, faster, cheaper. You don't need to be rich if everything you need is produced efficiently and without like trying to steal from you,
exactly.
Et cetera. So yeah. And then the upside is unlimited, but the baseline is humanitarian enough that we're not in the richest country in the world. Like we're not like torturing people through basically benign negligence. And, you know, at least having some kind of...
And the obsession with wealth, I think, would subside, because then it's no longer... Everyone's basic means of survival, not everyone, but most everyone's basic means of survival are largely being met.
Yeah, so they're not pissed.
Yeah, you can live and you can survive and you can get on with your life, whether you are a bricklayer or you're the president, CEO, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we're always going to have unrest for the system if the system is not working for everybody.
Yes. Exactly.
And if you have the average guy who's a pipe fitter, welder, and even if he's making $150K a year, it's difficult to have 3 kids, live in a relatively urban area. No wonder he was pissed. He's like, dude, I spend 80 hours a week working, breathing in toxic fumes, building critical infrastructure so that people can flush their shit down the toilet. And I'm still getting screwed?
Yeah.
What?
I know.
So
he needs to get orange pilled.
Yeah. And then once we're all on that standard, I mean, it does give you hope. This is true.
Amen to that. Yeah. I think that was a good session.
Cool.
That was only one chapter. Like that is probably a pivotal chapter in this book.
Yeah.
And such a great point. And then I really, as much as Taleb, I mean, we're all human. We all have our rough edges. But I love how he invokes this metaphor that just makes it so obvious how retarded it is. Right? Like the birds are going to fly whether you lecture them or not, right? Yeah. Society is going to self-organize whether you lecture it to or not.
Right.
In fact, it's going to self-organize better the less you lecture it, less you waste people's time lecturing them about your, Marxist utopian ideals. So
yeah, I mean, I think that if everybody acts in self-interest, and the self-interest of everybody is the collective interest of everybody, then you have a self-reinforcing system that is going to, by its very nature, drive people into more ethical interactions and prescribe that to a timeline over hundreds of years, and just really puts it into perspective to be be grateful, to embody the gratitude of living through such a pivotal transformational time.
Yeah.
And to be able to shape it, to be here talking about it, and to put our goodwill into its development, and hope some AI in the future watches our episodes and decides that that's how we should be doing things.
Decides to develop some ethics, perhaps. Yeah. And the key to all that is limiting individual self-interest by other individual self-interest, right? So yes. The right for me to swing my fist stops where your face begins, kind of thing. Like,
yeah, like you see this in plant life all the time, where if you have a dominant plant, it'll cast shade over the other ones, and it'll strangle them out because it's taller than them. But something that's very cool that happens is that if it's a mother tree and one of its children grows near it, or even if it's not related to it, the big tree will, through its roots, actually feed some of the other plant life, but just the plant life that is kind of symbiotic with it.
Interesting.
So we need to create a society in which trees are encouraged to grow tall, but also where their roots are encouraged to help the growth of the plants that are just getting started, even though they're well established.
Beautiful. Beautiful place to put a button on it.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Join us for the next one.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.